Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Art Without Walls, the spirit of the Bhulabhai Desai Memorial Institute in Contemporary Practice, supported by the Kiranadar Museum of Art and Avid Learning. Today's panel will dive into the history of the arts in a newly independent and modern India, while questioning what spaces of incubation in the future will look like. I would like to now invite my panelists on stage. Pheroza Godrej, Ranjit Hoskote, Owais Husain, Anahita Uberoi, and our moderator, Reema Gehi Desai.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here this afternoon. There is a lot going on, and it means a lot that all of you all have chosen to be with us this afternoon. Thank you, Avid Learning. Thank you, Art Mumbai, for hosting this discussion. I'm quite excited. Before we begin, I think for those of you in the audience who perhaps may have not been witness to Bhulabhai Desai Memorial Institute or may have known about it, I'm just going to share a little something about what this space was before we deep dive into this discussion with our incredible panel. Right. Located in the heart of 10 South Bombay, the city's cultural scene found an address at 89 Warden Road. The Bhulabhai Desai Memorial Institute, or BMI, a space that prompted interdisciplinary arts, was founded in 1952, 5 years after India's independence. It was founded by arts patron Madhuri Ben Desai and established in the memory of her father-in-law, well-known lawyer and freedom fighter Bhulabhai Desai, after whom the neighborhood of Breach Candy is officially remonikered. Madhuri Ben, however, played the role of a silent patron and handed over the responsibility of the Institute's day-to-day functioning to its trustee manager, Soli Batliwala, who happened to be a friend of her late husband, Dhirubhai. Soli had the reputation of being extremely temperamental and a die-hard congressman turned card-carrying communist. He was the epicenter of the space. At the BMI, Soli Mama, as he was known to everybody, propagated the dynamism and the generosity of the family of Bhulabhai Desai, whose vision changed the way freshly independent India engaged with arts. The estate comprised 2 bungalows set at an angle. Madhuri Ben lived in road-fronting Hasman. Another ground+1 Art Deco structure was the Institute, vibrant with activity from 10 in the morning to 11 at night. The space allowed artists of different disciplines to mingle with each other and generate a free flow of ideas. Thespians Ibrahim Al-Qazi and Satyadev Dubey founded the theatre unit. Dancer Meenakshi Raja practiced her classical dance. Sitar maestro Ravi Shankar established Kinara School of Music in 1962. His contemporary Vilayat Khan too was allotted a room each, as was sculptors Pilu Pochkanawala and B. Vittal, while artists such as V.S. Gaitonde, M.F. Husain, Nalini Malani, Taib Mehta, B. Prabha, and Nasreen Mohammadi rented the studio spaces for a nominal fee of 1 rupee. It was also home to Bombay's first private art gallery, Gallery 59, set up by Bal Chabra, and the home for the National Centre for the Performing Arts. Clearly, the BMI was far more than a space. It was a crucible for creative exchange where artists, musicians, dancers, actors, filmmakers, theatre makers, and writers not only shared rooms but also ideas, influences, and inspiration. It helped shape the city's cultural ecosystem at a time when cross-disciplinary collaboration was rare, making it a truly generative space. On that note, I'd like to begin with you, Ranjit, as a cultural theorist, to reflect on what a space like BMI meant for a city in transition, newly independent, modernizing, and artistically awakening.
Thank you so much, Reema. And it's lovely to be on this very special panel, thinking back to this moment in our city's also our country's cultural history. And thank you all for being here this afternoon. You know, when I first saw that acronym BDMI or BMI, I thought we were talking about some kind of computer cable to effect data transfer. So I'm just going to call it the Bhulabhai, which is what I grew up speaking of the institution as. But I'll dwell on that metaphor of data transfer a little as we go along. Also, just by way of prelude, I just want to hold two things in mind. The first time I ever heard of the Bhulabhai as a child, it was not really in a visual arts context. It's because an older cousin who passed on far too early studied music there. He studied with Ravi Shankar and Shambhu Das at the Kinner School of Music. It's Kinner, by the way, as in the celestial musician. So that was my first glimpse or glimmering of what this amazing institution had been. And later, of course, coming into the visual arts, this institution revealed itself in its great complexity. And I'm thinking back to another moment when Prafulla Dhanuker, in the slightly unlikely ethos of a wedding that we were both at, actually drew the map of the Bhulabhai with every studio from memory on a napkin for me, which is lost in my archives, but may surface. But just that act of mapping by someone who had been nourished by music and came into the visual arts, Prafulla, we all knew her. The idea that this institution had meant so much that it was really engraved in her memory reminds us of how all of us have been inheritors to it in many ways. I'm thinking here of the long afterlife of the Bhulabhai, as it then opened out in so many ways. We'll talk about this as we go along. Various NCPA contexts, for instance. Also, Akbar Padamse's Vision Exchange Workshop. Many of these platforms or crucibles or cradles were really trying to reprise this amazing experience. So having spoken of the before and the after, I'll actually speak about what the Bhulabhai Institute must have meant to these young artists. In an incredible way, I think it formed a transitional moment between colonial era patronage, which typically came either from the former princely states or the rising capitalist bourgeoisie, if you will. And before the rise of the private galleries, you have this great transitional moment when you have a scenario where artists have access to studios. There's no pressure to produce outcomes, and they actually can share in a space of generosity and collegiality. These are very fragile moments, and which is why one would treasure them. Thinking back, I was just amazed to think of how strangely like a Kunstverein it was. There were artist studios. You just listed some of the people who worked there. Dancers like Sitara Devi and Rohini Bhate, Alkazi's theater unit, which also meant that everybody in the Alkazi ambit came in there. The young artists who wanted to be actors or actors who became artists. Then there was Ravi Shankar and Shambhu Das and Ameyo Das Gupta who ran Kinner. Ravi Shankar ran it more or less nominally because he had already vanished westwards. It's the other two chaps who really ran the academy. But also I want to dwell on how this space was nourished not only in terms of the city or the country, but also there was a stream of visitors. We know this through the Alkazi Chronicles, for instance. Sculptors like Alexander Calder and Isamu Noguchi came through. So the kinds of dialogues that our first generation of post-colonial artists had with some of these people visiting from a Euro-American context, I've just named two sculptors. There also were dancers and musicians. It really made for the emergence of something that I would very cautiously call an avant-garde. Yeah, so I think that's something to hold in mind. But also, there's a tendency through the lens of nostalgia to regard the Bhulabhai as a singularity. And my instincts as a cultural historian generally are against seeing anything as a singularity. I would like to see this much more. I would like to situate the Bhulabhai in its multiple contexts. So one of these is what I've elsewhere called the long 1950s, from roughly 1946 to about 1964 in Bombay, which was already a global cosmopolis. And I say this because I'd like to place the Bhulabhai in a map that also includes the group around Marg magazine, which was founded in 1946 by Mulk Raj Anand, novelist, critic, political activist, with the support of the Tatars. So also as we go along, we see the deep connection between an enlightened political class, an enlightened capitalist class, and an emerging art scene. So, patronage doesn't just hang in some vacuum. It has very, very material foundations. I'd also like to think here of Chetna, which was founded by a journalist called Sudhakar Dikshit, working together with the novelist Raja Rao, who, like many good students of Gandhi and exponents of yoga, eventually went to Texas and ended his days there. But at the heyday of Chetna, it functioned also as a multi-art space. Writers and activists met there. People had their exhibitions. There was a bookstore. The canteen grew into a restaurant. So I'd like to also think about this pattern of evolution of people with various cultural purposes coming together in one space. Yeah. So this would be part of the mapping. I'd also like to offer some homage to K.H. Ara, who's somehow become a marginal figure. But the Artist Center, which he set up on Rampart Row, is another gathering place, a place of gathering and making and discussion, which I would place in this constellation. And also Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay's Bharatiya Natya Sangh, which was somewhere near where Khyber restaurant is today. So I'd place all these other nodes on the map within the city. I'd also like to, we are very proud of our city, but we need to see ourselves also as part of something larger. So if you look beyond the city, just making some notes, I think the Tagorean exemplar of Shantiniketan was very, very strong. I think it definitely influenced all of these people. I know that Bobby Padamsee, who forms part of the prehistory of this historical moment, was certainly influenced by that, as was Alkazi in a dialogic way, and many of these other people. And also Uday Shankar's Almora Academy, founded in 1938, which again forms to me a prehistory for this, and Sundari Sri Dharani's Triveni Kala Sangam, which was founded in 1950, and the architectures by Joseph Allen Stein. So once again, you see how cultural forces from within and from elsewhere come together. Yeah, so I'm going to leave it there. I think we could come back to the afterlives. But my purpose really has been to situate the Bhulabhai in several larger maps.
Right. Thank you, Ranjit. Now let's just walk down memory lane. Both Anahita and Owais, both of you have inherited stories from your parents. You from someone, as Ranjit mentioned, that Alkazi, there were an ambit of factors there. And one such protege was your mum, Vijayabai. Tell us her time. Whenever I've had the opportunity and the privilege of interviewing her over several occasions, I don't think any interview has gone complete without her mentioning her time at Bhulabhai Desai Memorial Institute, or Bhulabhai, and how instrumental it was in shaping whom she became as a theatre maker, really.
So yeah, you're right, Reema. I think there wasn't a time that mum did not mention, as they called it, Bhulabhai. It was just left as that. But it really helped in forming who she was. And I do believe all of them were impacted because of the time they lived, and they were the first post-independent generation of artists in the country. So they were burning with passion. They were burning with the joy of freedom. And they were really burning with wanting to say a lot, taking foreign influences but making it very much their own. And this institution truly enriched them because it was a time of genuine artistic exchange. They all worked together in these various studios. They were in and out of each other's spaces while they were working. And I remember she said that often when she would rehearse a new play, some of them would even come in. So there's one particular play, and I've forgotten the name, but when they were rehearsing, for some reason during the whole rehearsal process, Gaitonde and Ravi Shankar sat in through the whole rehearsal process, and they were very much part of that play. There was another instance when she was doing a play and was trying to figure out her set, and she would refer to because they were all friends, they were all in their 20s, they were young, they were friends, they were passionate about doing things. And in today's day and age, in the time of social media and everyone talking about let's do some collabs, you know they really did collaborate.
They were the OGs.
They were the OGs. So she spoke of how there was a play she was doing and Gaitonde did the backdrop. He said, don't worry, I'll do the backdrop for you. Kishori Amonkar did the music. It was just shared love. It was shared respect. It was shared creative madness. And she even often spoke about how they had time and it wasn't just about creating. So while they would be working on their own stuff, after it was over, they would go out, and in her autobiography she says we did a lot of bunkus, which means we just sort of just hung out and did a whole lot of just hung out and spent time together with no agenda. And even though she had a theatre group, Rangayan, which was considered the seed of modern Marathi theatre, while there was a core of them who worked the core of Rangayan, she said they were like concentric circles. So there were about 5 of them who were the decision makers. Then another 10 of them who were the actors and directors. Then there was another circle. And then the 4th circle were the advisors. And I'm just going to name them because I among them, there was Soli Batliwala himself, Vasudev Gaitonde, Jitendra Abhisheki, literary critic V.L. Kulkarni, English poet and writer Nissim Ezekiel, and many, many other highly esteemed writers who were largely Marathi writers, but they just all worked beautifully together. I know that Prafulla Dahanukar, who was this lovely artist woman, Kishori Amonkar, and my mother were the 3 most delightful, close friends beyond just these exchanges. 3 very different women, 3 very strong women, but women who held together through thick and thin for the rest of their lives, I just want to add something about Soli Batliwala because he was, even when I told my mother now, who's 91 years old, and her memory is also not that great, but when I told her that I was doing this talk, and I mentioned Soli Batliwala to her, her face lit up with the warmest smile, and she said, Soli Bhai. So it was so much love and admiration. Also, Mom's guru, who was Alkazi, was from Bhulabhai.
Yes.
And Mom went back later to start her own theatre company there. And I'm just going to read this little excerpt from her autobiography, which is in Marathi, and we're in the process of trying to translate it. But it was the moment she went to Soli Batliwala to ask him if she could have a space there. So she said, um, I remembered Al-Qazi and the theatre unit days as I entered the building again. Solibhai saw me and said, "You returned to Mumbai and you called me, but I've been waiting for you ever since." I asked his permission to start the activities of my new theatre group Rangayan at Bhulabhai. He laughed out aloud and took me to the glass room on the terrace and opened all the doors. I knew the area too well. The seafront, coconut palms swaying in the breeze, and sunlight. Solibhai said, "This room is currently with Geeta Bali." Geeta Bali was a famous actress. She would have story and screenplay readings in this room. Solibhai looked at my physical condition because at that time mom was pregnant with her first child. Solibhai looked at my physical condition and my size and said jokingly, "You've come on time. Geeta Bali's work is just getting over. And in any case, it seems like it'll be some time before your work begins. But I will reserve the room and the terrace for your use in the evenings." And so I could get space for my theatre group. Now we needed a name. So it was as organic, as small, if I could use the word, not in a small way, but it was beautiful, small. There was time. They really felt the entire artistic community, though they were so varied, felt like they belonged. They belonged, and I think that's something as modern day artists, one doesn't have a sense of a larger belonging. But that was the beauty and the magic.
Absolutely. And always your father, MF Hussain, um, also rented a studio there for a nominal fee of 1 rupee. And often, I just met Tab Mehta's daughter the other day, and she mentioned that oftentimes when he used to take off on his travels, would offer the studio space to Tab Mehta. That spirit of camaraderie and, the shared work was what I think Bhulabhai really stood for. If I may hear your thoughts on yours or the stories that you've inherited from him about Bhulabhai.
First of all, thanks so much for having us here, and thanks everyone for coming. I had a very interesting chat with a young, brilliant mind, Azan Karan, last night, and he had many questions, as all curious 17-year-olds have. And he said that, where would you like to? Are you satisfied as where your art is at today? So I said that's an interesting question, because the preoccupations and preferences, or the important factors that were guiding our generation back in the 90s when we started off were completely different from my father's, the modernists, back in the 40s. And that got me to understand also, I'll try to explain also, the framing of time plays a big role. So, for instance, like Ranjit mentioned about the importance of the metropolis, not only India as a larger sort of a state, but also the metropolis, where, as we know, Bombay played an important role in forming the birth of modernism in India and got the progressives together. This was before even 47, and which led to this moment, And I think, there are many anecdotes coming back to this. One of the most important things, I think, is that you rightfully mentioned the importance of Prafulla, and especially more so in the case of Husain and Guy, to a certain extent, where at that time, Bombay, nobody had space to work. So they lived in very small quarters. There was no space to actually do your work. Also, you were surrounded by a lot of other elements, which were, whether it was family or, the community, whatever. So here there was this oasis in this city. And in one of my favorite decades in history, with the 50s, and where you not only had that space, but also you had the whole community and the environment, which was electric in a way. It became electric, but like all moments of history at that time and that present, we don't realize the importance of what we are living through. Very seldom we go through that. And it's only in hindsight we understand the importance and the implication of that. So similarly with, I would like to say specifically with Hussein and Guy at that time, because they were very close to, so they knew Prafula very well. And actually at that time, and Prafula, because of her, by sheer relationship to the music world, all her cousins were these brilliant sort of, artists. And because Ravi Shankar and Uday Shankar and so through that there was a whole stress on the music community. So through that she was influenced and encouraged, and in her early 20s to get a space there. And then she had to leave for Paris to study, and that's when Hussein and Guy took over, and they were like little kind of squatters in a way. In fact, they would even hide from Soli, or and these people who would come asking for rent. They were trying to duck most of the time. But they were the enfant terribles in that space, and extremely prolific. At least Hussein was. With all due respects to Guy. But there were, and a fun fact was also that they bullied, when Prafula was around, they also bullied her to get them food, and good old Maharashtrian food, and that's what kept them going. And anyway, so and at the same time, there were times when the three of them were in the studio together working at the same time also. So those were exciting times to imagine the kind of work that was being created, for all three of them, and with such distinct personalities. But coming back to this, I think the community space uh, served an important station in their life, and also with Hussein's understanding of, his relationship with Bal Chabra's father, and he was very close to him, and through him he got to know Bal, and they became very very close friends for life. And when Bal came back from Hollywood, and he wanted to make films, but then he encouraged him to get into the art space, and Gallery 59 was born then, and and it was again very tumultuous. And then whenever he would leave, because he was traveling a lot to Europe with his work, so there were times in the studio. So was also offered to Tayyab. So Tayyab would also work there as well. So these were, and at the same time, the community space with all the performing artists, as you know, the whole layout. So the ground floor was Gallery 59, and of course the performing space. And on the first floor were the artist studios, and on the second floor you had Ravi Shankar and Uday Shankar, and the musicians there. So, and then the famous staircase, where Madhuri Ben would sit there, and literally almost every day, as you were mentioning once. And so you can it's almost like a film playing out. And I had the good fortune of I think somewhere growing up as a child was this whole romanticized idea of Bhulabhai Desai. Obviously, I was not alive then, but from my father, and this whole chart space of the performing, as well as the visual artist was also part of the performance, because people were walking in and out open studios, and um, and I guess I'm not sure, but Gaitonde actually thriving from that as much as Hussein did, because that was very key to him, coming from um painting cinema hoardings overnight when the tram stopped in Gamdevi, so that he could, stretch it and put it on the handcart and take it to Dadar to, show it at the Shantaram talkies. So, that was something that he carried forward here, and then that stayed with him for the rest of his life. So the community space was very important. It was and I think I had the good fortune of experiencing that in Kanoria.
Right, right. One person on the panel who has stood witness to BMI, the spirit of BMI, as well as the atmosphere and this physical space. You were a young woman studying in college when we spoke, when Bhulabhai Desai was around. And tell us, Dr. Godrej, about your memories of this space and what it meant for for your generation to have a space like that right at the center of Mumbai, then Bombay.
Thank you, Reema, for having me on this panel. I never thought I'd be speaking about Bhulabhai ever in my life. So thank you. And the panelists have really brought back a lot of memories, a lot of nostalgia with experiences that they have shared with their families, or Ranjit through his essays and his reading, and your cousin who introduced you. So I wasn't in college, I was in school. So I was younger when I was introduced to the Bhulabhai and to Madhuri, who we, as just as everybody referred to Soli uncle as Soli Mama, Madhuri was always Madhuri Masi to me. We were not related, and to either of them, my family and myself. But there was something that attracted me to this place, which is I grew up on 72 Bhulabhai Desai Road, and Bhulabhai was on 89 Bhulabhai Desai Road. So it was literally a hop, skip, and a jump to go there at any given time to hear something, a performance. I don't know anything about Indian classical music, but something must have stirred in me that not only Indian classical music, but Carnatic classical music fascinated me. And I have heard numerous people sitting on the floor, all of us sitting in a Baitak style sitting, hearing these concerts there. And of course, B. Prabha was a great friend. And when she and Vittal got married, they wanted to go to Kashmir for a holiday. And Soli Mama, Soli uncle, as I called him, Soli Mama said, they have no money. They just have enough money for a one-way ticket, train ticket. So my mother just quietly told him that in Gujarati, how much do they need? Some ridiculous amount, like 200 rupees or something. And Prabha and Vittal took off, not knowing when they would be back, if they'd sell any work or what they would do. But those were the sharings, that I remember overhearing. Soli Mama was quite something, he was this rather large figure, always in a crisp white cotton kurta, crisp white pajamas. And when he moved from Bhulabhai to Jahangir Art Gallery as honorary secretary, he dressed like that. And Madhuri Masi was quite a very traditional Gujarati lady. But she had a great, I think it's her background also, coming from the Kasturba Lalbai family. She brought a lot of that into Bombay. And of course, being the daughter-in-law of Bhulabhai, the wife of Dhirubai, who was our first ambassador, who I didn't know, our first ambassador, independent India, to Switzerland. And Soli went as his first secretary. They were really, really close as a family to each other. And he has a Parsi family, of course, and they supported him. But this whole thing, I used to remember that I didn't know much about politics. I'd heard about the Congress party, but I didn't know anything about the Communist Party. And he was the one who first mentioned that he used to carry a card, or whatever that meant, for a 9-year-old. And but we never looked at him with any political feelings. I mean, there was a group of people not related to each other who wanted to do something. And besides the studios that they gave out, he encouraged a pianist, Rati Modi, to have her studio there as well. So there was this baby grand piano and lessons going on, and there was this sitar going on, and there was a young Shamim Ahmed who came to work with Ravi Shankar. Ravi Shankar actually took him for years to California to run his school over there. And so Shamim was there. And after Baal left, there was a hairdresser as well. So it was quite quite strange. And what else? What else did he introduce me to? He introduced me to design. NID had a showroom on the first floor of the Akash Ganga when the bungalow came down. And one had never seen everything black and white, black and white, black and it was quite alien, and it was a lovely studio. Daram Chawda, the photographer, I mean, every medium that you could find, he could expose us to, he had them there. And this 1 rupee a year rent was really ridiculous because she carried it forward to the next stage. And this I remember very, very vividly. One evening we'd gone for dinner and she said, today Jay was here and they're desperately looking for space for the NCPA. And so I have offered him the whole of the second floor. I mean, that's a lot of space at 1 rupee a year rent. And I've told him he can stay here for 5 years. So he's going to pay me 5 rupees a year, 5 rupees for the 5 years. And I've also told him that from my bungalow, I want a nice garden in front of my house, which became the Tata Park, which is now in a very sad state. Tata Electric supported that. So I want the view to remain, etc. So, there was lots of things happening over there. Artists were there. Prafulla, of course, was much younger. Nalini also was there. Akbar lived down the road at, forgot the name of the building. It was on the tip of my tongue. Tahir Mansion. So Baal lived there, Darshan. By the time I got to know him, your dad, of course, your mom, your dad as well. And we just took it all in our stride and took it so much for granted. And of course, Vittal Terrace, Vittal Court on the terrace, Vittal Court where Mr. Al-Qazi would have all his, plays. And so it was a little cocoon we were living in at that time.
Even home to NCPA.
Home to NCP is another story, but I'm not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Bhulabhai today. And it was just, I can't understand what was going through their minds when they said we should do this, but it's obviously the larger context of independence, post-independence. We had Shantiniketan was thriving at that time. JJ was also there, and so was Baroda. And of course, Ghari and places like that. But Bombay had nothing as a center for... and this background of these people was so different. And Bhulabhai went on to, I just feel sitting here that it started with a bang. Bhulabhai really started with a bang. But it ended in a whimper.
Right.
Quoting Eliot, Ranjit.
Right.
It really ended in a whimper. And in 71, when I established Bhulabhai, she was I established Pheroza. She was one of my first visitors. And I remember your dad was quite angry. So was Akbar. That what is this? You started this first show of yours with Benre and Ebber and Ara and Sabawala and Naren Panchal and Chavda. What about us? I said, you people hardly used to take any notice of me. And to approach you I would have been scared. I would have been very scared. But they were friends, Akbar, Mal, with Ann Patel, his comrade, the psychoanalyst, would just drop in at Simrosa when I started. And, Baal had a pet name for everybody. So I don't know why.
Opri and Fagai.
Opri. I don't know. And later on, much later, Lakshman, he also came to Bhulabhai. But Madhuri Masi told me something one day. She came into the gallery in the morning at about 11. And I'll never forget that because I didn't understand the implication of what she was saying about Bhulabhai. And she walked in from shopping across at Breach Candy. And she said, I'm very glad you started this gallery, but you know what you've got yourself into. I said, yes, it's a lot of hard work. We'd had about 3 shows by then. And she said, they'll break your heart one day. So I said, who, the artists? They're all friends of mine. Why would Prafulla, why would B. Prabha? She said, no. They'll break your heart one day and you're very soft. He said, you don't even have a Soli Mama to protect you. But that never happened. But she did say, as long as you have Simrosa, I'll never open a gallery at Bhulabhai again. And that she stuck to her word. I think what happened was this open studio facility. They wanted, as you all have said, that when Husain went away, Tayyab could use the studio. When Ravi Shankar went away, someone else could studio. Your mother came there, Satyadev Dubey was there, Alaknanda Samarth was there, everyone was there, and nobody objected. I think when she found them crossing the boundaries, she said, no, this was the one thing I asked for. Everyone shared the studios because the space was really tight. And if you lock your studio, tala laga diya. I remember Shamim telling me, okay, I can only lock my sitar. I said, but who's going to take your sitar box out of here? It seems okay, if you lock your sitar box, somebody else can come and play. They all sort of smiled patronizingly, but that was the only thing. Even when the Crafts Council of Western India had to, for some reason, leave their office, we had 2 cupboards of books and 2 cupboards of showcases for ceramics. And he immediately said, I have a space at the back. Please go and put your cupboards over there and lock it up. And that's all you'll get. Enough, just space for 2 cupboards and 2 showcases, and start your office there again. So it was that generosity and wanting people to come use the space. Today, if you give anybody an inch of space in Bombay, I don't know what will happen. But that was Bhulabhai.
Right. So on that note, like you mentioned, the space today in the city, and also always you mentioned about the Kanoria Arts Center. There was also Gari Studios that you mentioned in Delhi that followed a Bhulabhai model, if I may say so. And then there was the Chauraha at the NCPA, where these multidisciplinary art forms converged together and, to have a shared dialogue. But I think in the interest of time, I'm going to ask 2 questions to all our panel members of the learnings from the Bhulabhai and, what were the challenges that still remain?
Can I just okay? First of all, actually, I just wanted to add a little bit something that to take from Pheroza's beautiful narration of all the things that have happened there and her reflections. One very interesting thing, I think the 2 things which came out to which we should not miss out. One was the point that the first point being the historical importance, of course, as we know, but that Shantiniketan played at that time under Tagore's vision, and it played a certain role which was relevant for then, and which could not be sort of replicated in the 50s, for instance, because India was another place. And similarly, what happened in Bhulabhai could never be replicated by Gadi, because Gadi served another purpose altogether. And similarly, Kanoria, for that matter, post Cold War, when our generation was trying to reach out through platforms like Khoj and other sort of initiatives in different parts, which is now called the Global South. And we were trying to find, sort of an outreach within sort of kindred spirit with other artists and other art creators. Um, so Kanoria was one of the places which played, had a role to play, which was totally different from the other models. So one the historical significance of that, and it could never be sort of replicated anywhere else. But the other point I'd like to make, just before we forget, is that there is this amazing platform and amazing sort of electric atmosphere of exchange, a creative exchange, and in respect and in hindsight, when we look at it historically, the whole collection of these figures, these luminaries, um, and at their peak or sort of or either on the peak or on their rise to their own careers. Uh, there was this whole human element, that whole exchange that they had, whether it was on uh, certain nuances, certain theater, certain drama taking place, whether it was to do emotionally, and even sort of in the sense like, okay, this one was in love with this one, and or whether it was somebody getting somebody food, or this one being protected by this one, and this whole thing. But obviously it seems very benign right now in context to the amazingly dangerous and dark world that we live in today. So it seems something so innocent, but that is another side which needs to be also kind of try to understood. And I think this platforms like this, what we are doing is just brilliant, because there are new cohorts coming into the space of art and understanding even the whole landscape of culture and art that is progressing. People have very little memory, and I think Ranjit, you of all the people would understand that the most, because how do you, when you bring into context certain figures and certain key moments in history, there's absolutely a blank, or it's either textbook reference. That's right. And the importance that of not only documenting and archiving, but even these kind of discussions to take that forward. Sorry.
And unfortunately, I mean, these are long conversations I've had with Dr. Godrej, is that Bhulabhai Desai is one institute that's been, there's been so little documentation and images. We struggle to find images. I mean, of course, it's also access to camera was far lesser then. So there wasn't any. So, I mean, right. I mean, in the context that oral history then becomes so critical for us to remember that moment, that crucible that Bhulabhai was really.
It's also got something to do with the character of Bombay. I think our strengths here are that we're a mercantile city, we're democratic in spirit, but our sense of our own history is fragmentary, it's episodic, unlike Delhi, where even a relatively young institution will archive itself. It goes, there are chronicles. I'm speaking from another moment that Nancy and I were part of, not here, but in Delhi, Sarai, at the Center for Study of Developing Societies. When I think back about what a young movement that was and how very well annotated, chronicled, and archived it is, I find this tragic. But I think there's another story here. Owais, thank you for flagging everything that you did, because you correctly talk about how this was a chosen kinship among people. They weren't necessarily related in a genetic fashion, but it was this kinship of practice that brought them together. But I would also like to see the Bhulabhai as not only an inauguration of something, but probably the terminus of cultural impulses that belonged in an older India. Because when you look at everyone who was there, you mentioned the Lalbais. That could only have happened in Bombay presidency, with very, very strong connections between the patronal class in Bombay and in Ahmedabad, which was broken by the emergence of linguistic states. So this is something that we don't think of often enough. Husain comes from Holkar, Indore, really. Raza comes from the central provinces. Other people come from Portuguese Goa, Sousa, and so on. It's a completely different and kaleidoscopic cultural landscape, which we no longer have. And with that, we've lost a great deal of cultural variety and dissonances that then give rise to something new.
Also, just to add on to what we're speaking of here, all this whole interdisciplinary, like you said, it was relationships. There was a human element to it, and they thought nothing of saying, "Oh, you're a musician." I'm a theater person, you're an artist, you're a dancer, but they still all felt very connected because they felt like they were artists. Remember, Reema, you were saying, someone says, "No, I'm a theater person, no, I'm an art person." They didn't have that then because they genuinely believed that everything influenced everything and they came under one large umbrella. And I think that influenced them even as human beings and they took it forward into life. Yes, it belonged to a particular time in history, but I think the lesson that came out of it was very important because it was all embracing. It was all about we're highly, we are very clear individuals. We do something that is very rooted to what our significant art is, but we respect and appreciate and disagree also with what others are doing, but there's a shared joy in that. And I think that they took that forward as human beings. And I think that is important. And it's really one of the most moving things I feel as growing up in a city like Bombay. We felt that so much where we were just all embracing. We really were. I'm saying we were, but it is true, and I think art and life, sort of just one thing spilled into the other, and it was a remarkable time. It really was.
I'm sorry, just taking from there. Uh, one of reflections of Bal, which he shared with, in fact, a shout out to Savita Apte, who's art historian, as we know, and who has somehow brilliantly recorded that particular period in modern art, Indian modern art. Is that Gallery 59, Bal's biggest issue was that they fought all the time. And he could not understand, why can't I just have a normal show? Why can't we just have something straightforward? There were fights all throughout, and finally he kind of wound up, and whatever happened.
There's a story in Shanta Gokhale's book which says that he tore it down because one morning he finds, because in this interest of we must not have locks, he found dancers rehearsing there, and he was so livid that he entered the space and tore the gallery down, and that was the end of Gallery 59, Bombay's first private gallery. But yes, I mean, Dr. Godrej, like, what is the lesson that us as the young art patrons can really take from an institution, if I may call it, the Bhulabhai?
See, Reema, life has moved on. Okay, all our lives have to move on, and nostalgia is very good. Documentation is good, but we live in a changing world.
Of course.
See, and at one end we have this huge institution called the National Center for the Performing Arts. Performing arts. I wish they did have a gallery. The Jahangir Nicholson was there at one time, but moved on. And at the other end, we have a huge organization, the NMACC. We have Prithvi, which plays its role. And of course, Jahangir Art Gallery continues to play its role. I think from the fine arts point of view, the JJ School of Art has to take on a more critical role today. And it's an institution that if we don't nurture it, I don't know in what direction it'll go. So I don't want to dwell on the past. How do we go forward? patronage has changed. Patronage has changed radically. I was just telling Ranjit, I said, when we did No Pasi is an island, and he said, what has No Pasi is an island got to do with the Bhulabhai? I said, it has a lot to do with it because we picked up the threads of the JJ School of Art. And why did the JJ School of Art come into existence? There are so many schools of art today, and sometimes maybe too many or too little is not for me to comment. But School of Architecture, commercial art, we have to look at institutions. And the other word that just keeps coming back into mind, two words actually. One word I don't like, but we have to live with it, philanthropy. We can't get away from the new patronage. Who is the new patronage? Why are they putting their hard-earned money into the arts? And are they putting it justly, fairly, like Bhulabhai did? Everybody was there, as Anahita mentioned. It's all embracing. This is the future. And we have to come to some sort of grips with it, each one of us collectively and individually. And there's nothing wrong in that. And the other thing is documentation. I learned this from Mr. Al-Qazi. If he hadn't taught me how to document, I couldn't have done the things I did 50, 55 years later in my own way. And with documentation, you need serious scholarship, really serious. Go back to the primary source. Go back to the Marathi books if you can. I mean, for ancient Indian culture, everyone, none of us really know Sanskrit. But these artists at Bhulabhai, Akbar learned Sanskrit, had a Sanskrit tutor. Husain had a Sanskrit tutor. So they went back to the primary sources. And that's very, very creditable. I don't know Sanskrit. I don't know Persian. Yet I want to talk about Mughal art. So it's a bigger question as you go forward. And I would really urge young scholars in this room or later, pick up one or two topics. Don't try to tackle everything. It's impossible. You cannot be. We're not all of us Ranjit Hoskotes, okay?
I did not see that coming.
I really admired this man. He was much junior to me in doing his master's. And a colleague of mine who is actually, I'm referring to Dr. Milind Malshe, your teacher and my colleague, philosophy, music, Sanskrit, name it, and he ended up teaching at IIT. So, it's a whole lifetime's education. As we go forward, that's what we have to think of, that, scholarship, archiving. You build your future if you know your past. It's as simple as that.
That's so true. Any last thoughts on, going forward? What can we learn from Bhulabhai?
See, as Pheroza rightly said, we're living at a different time. So the world has moved on, and words like philanthropy, words like, sorry to say, but the words like sponsorship. I mean, these are all what it's sort of morphed into these sort of words, but physical space, real estate is a big issue in a city like ours. And so one does see people who are trying to encourage the arts through, I would say nowadays there are a lot of festivals, right? But those are still end product related. It's all about you bring your stuff, we'll curate and we'll put together something. But there's very little studio space available where people can work. And there are some places that do have the physical space, but even that costs them. And so there's this it was a different time where things, again, when you're talking about that 1 rupee, you paid that 1 rupee as a token. I think by the time my mother came in to Bhulabhai, she was charged 30 rupees per month to rent that place. But at every quarter, Solibai used to personally donate 100 rupees to them. So it just sort of worked around. But um, I think education is mushrooming all over the place. There are many, many institutes that now are teaching the arts. Uh, but we do need the arts all over the world does need support. It does need it. Governments usually support. We don't have that here. But
Nor does the US anymore.
does exactly. So it's really something that I'm not quite sure how, and those are bigger questions, but in small ways, there are patrons in our city and in our country who consistently do help in their own way. But there's nothing quite like the Bhulabhai Institute, and maybe something will emerge. Pheroza, you want to say something to that,
No,
right?
I just wanted to say we did have these institutions, all the academies. I mean, every department of culture had their own academy.
That's right.
But I don't want to comment, but we did have it, but somewhere along the way, they got diluted, whether it's in art or craft or painting or music or, even festivals. We had the young artists in singing. We just don't get Kalke Kalakar. Who are the Kalke Kalakar and where are they coming from and where do they perform? Maybe we need more information or there's something there. Maybe Ranjit, you'd like to say something.
Yeah, just very quickly, not to romanticize the Bhulabhai, but I think there was a profound drive towards self-organizing in culture. It was a really wonderful meeting point of enlightened patronage and this desire to self-organize. And I think it's these impulses that need to come together. Yeah. So, I mean, it's all very well to talk about philanthropy, but sometimes you need visionary patrons who are not expecting outcomes. Exactly. So those are rare moments. So that's part of the problem. But also, I haven't thought this out carefully, but I think it has something to do with scale. The scale of everything today is large. It calls for resources, and that can only come from a certain kind of late capital. So maybe we need to think about reducing scale to something more sustainable. Owais, you have a thought about that?
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, just a quick note to what Pheroza just mentioned about Al-Qazi uncle, as we called him. And he was one of my earliest memory was my first time in New York. And he took me to his phenomenal photography archive. And I had this, I was this young guy, just fresh off the boat, wet behind the ears. And I just could not understand the depths and the mechanism of and the impact that such an exercise would take place and so meticulously done. Something which has not been appreciated as yet by the art world and the larger audience. But I think there is another problem. Part of being a visual art maker and understanding the generation that we came from and back in the 90s where I think we were the last of the generation which were proud to say when we went into a gathering and you were asked, so what do you do for a living? So what do you do? So I'm an artist. So no, but that's fine. What do you really do for a living? I mean, and then compared to that, where there was a social gathering in Bombay, compared to working and interning in a graphic workshop in a graphic studio in New York, and I was asked, "So you're an artist from India?" I said, "Yeah." How old are you? 22. Okay. So I mean, how do you manage? I mean, what do you do? So I'm an artist. No, but I mean, you can't survive on being an artist. And they couldn't believe that in India you had artists who actually didn't have a job in the day and who could do that. So the point I'm trying to drive at is that we're living in an extremely transactional world. The art space is not what it was in the 90s, where we were in each other's houses and studios, throwing chairs at each other and tearing everything apart, and absolutely, either through intoxicated or sober. But those were extremely tumultuous times, and I'm glad to have lived through that, because today everybody who's come out of an institution is already pronounced as a rock star or the next best thing or whatever, so suddenly it's become like a race. And it's something that I realized on working in Kenoria, because we were looked down by the students of architecture on SEP campus, and they looked down and said that, oh, you guys are technologically less superior, and you're not sort of academically kind of qualified students of architecture were, they thought. And I said that it's not a race. I mean, there's no meter, there's nothing to gauge it. So that has influenced a lot of the way of that time. Compared to today, you don't have the discussion. And today it's all about the meter. It's all about another valuation system that's taken place. So therefore, I think it's not about the institutions, as far as you pointed out. I think it's more about the patronage that you pointed out, who you need the vacuum of visionary patronage. I think, yes, there is the real thing also, to put food on the table and to be able to get out of bed and work throughout the rest of the day and create your art or whatever you need to do, but have the resources to do that. But to do that, you need to create. So it's a fine balance, but we are overwhelmed with the market space and the demand of the market space and the importance of being sort of relevant in that sense through our mediums. So it's a changed world. And therefore, a place like Kenoria was like an oasis in time for me and for a lot of us. I don't think so. There's a space for that anymore right now, unless there is a major seismic shift that happens in the way we create art, in the way we document or curate or design or collect. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons why we are also here in this phenomenal space. This is also an outcome of the market space. I mean, with all due respect to the art fairs, which are phenomenal, which are great vehicles, but then that's another moment of introspection to understand why we are here. Yeah.
Right. Sure.
Sorry, I wasn't just getting onto my phone for no reason. I, I was
I thought I was just being boring.
No. I was looking at some information because of what you just said. I think it's also good sometimes for us to highlight some good stuff that's happening. And, Sunil Shanbag from theatre, his Tamasha group has started a place in Alibag. It was given to them by a trust. It was given to him by a very generous human being who said, build here and allow artists to come and live here and create their work. Don't charge them. We don't want money from them. So actually, young artists, performers, artists, writers can go there, can apply to go there, and you can go and stay there for free and create your work and work with other artists as well. And I think when I heard that, I thought it's absolutely marvelous for it to happen today. And of course, it's not like once you join, you're going to be there and have a space there forever. It is a limited period of time, but it is a luxury to say, okay, fine, I'll go there. I don't have to pay. I don't have the resources. I know it's just one thing, but it takes one human being to do something, and bit by bit, maybe there is hope.
Right. And
You know?
and on that
There is hope. Never give up hope, because
Right.
otherwise we won't be here.
And I think on that note
Yeah.
of hope, we hope that this Bhulabhai model may work and across not too far now from Alibag, and taking all these lessons and the spirit of nostalgia and like Dr. Godrej said, looking forward. Yeah, let's hope there is another Bhulabhai model somewhere in Ali. Thank you. Thank you.